Today I'm going to be talking about getting rid of those unwanted, learned, self-sabotaging behaviors that all of us scapegoats have to face at one point or another in our lives. And I want to talk about this because every single scapegoated survivor that I've ever talked to that comes to see me, they all have a completely distorted view of who they are and a very distorted relationship with themselves. And I mean, this was me also for the majority of my life. I had a very twisted view of who I actually was. And this is the biggest problem, because the truth is that you're not the problem. However, your relationship with yourself is the problem. How you treat yourself, how you view yourself. This is the problem, and it's not cognitive. It's subconscious. It comes from a place of feeling. It's also knowing that your reactions, your mistakes, everything that you've been through in your life, any failures that you've undergone through, are understandable given what you've been through, and none of that defines who you are or where you're going. And certainly the narcissistic family system, the dysfunctional family, the toxic caretaker who raised you also does not they certainly do not define who you are and where you're going either. The biggest culprit that stands in the way of us having a relationship with ourselves is that core wound of shame. And hear me out for a second, because when it comes to the topic of shame, many survivors of complex trauma may not even know that they suffer from the effects of shame, and I was one of them. When I think back about, when I started studying scapegoating and understanding what the hell was happening to me, I often would see over and over again, like scapegoats, when they come out, they suffer from guilt and shame. And I thought, okay, guilt I get, because there was casualties that I had to leave behind, people that I love that I can't have a relationship with because they are tied to my abuser. And, having to go through that is extremely painful, and it can feel incredibly guilty as well to have to leave those casualties behind and prioritize your mental health. Because that's our choices, right? Either we prioritize our mental health and or we stay in a toxic environment that makes us sick, right? And so I used to think to myself, why would I be ashamed of what someone else did to me? Why would I feel shame for something that doesn't belong to me, right? All those labels that my abuser put on me, like that I had a horrible character and I was a devil and so on. I mean, none of that is reflected in my relationships. I'm happily married and have a good relationship with my kids. I have friends. Everything is peaceful in my life ever since I've gone no contact. So, where is this shame? Where does this shame come in, right? But once you start becoming aware of this wound and how it shaped you, and how it influenced your decisions, how it influences how you see yourself and how you interact with the world, you may come to realize that this core wound of shame, which began in childhood, it affects all areas of your life. And this is a major wound that actually needs to be addressed. And shame is by definition the core belief that you hold about yourself. It's the belief of who you think you are. Without even being aware that your actions are centered around that core belief, and without being aware that your actions consistently reinforce that core wound of shame. And there's definitely a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions that circle around that core wound of shame. However, shame remains how you view yourself. And shame could be sort of it's like a feeling that you may have in the background. It's something that you may have gotten so used to that you don't even realize that it's there, because it has become a part of you, and you've grown so used to feeling, having it inhabit your body that you don't even notice it, or that you don't even notice that it's there. And this feeling is the driver behind so many, commonly experienced behaviors for us scapegoated survivors. And I'm going to name a few of those, okay? And see if you guys are familiar with any of those, okay? And I'm sure many of you will. For example, shame is, I must people please. Because if I don't people please, I'm not lovable, just as I am. I'm not good enough, just as I am. Therefore, I have to please and please and please. And if I please somebody, surely then they will like me. I have to people please to compensate for that deep feeling that I'm not worthy, that feeling of shame. Shame is, I can't set boundaries. I can't say no because I will be abandoned if I set boundaries. I'm not worthy of having my boundaries respected. I'm not worthy of taking up the space that I should be taking, right? I don't deserve to have my boundaries be respected, It's terrifying to say no, because if I say no, maybe I'll be abandoned, right? So, shame causes us to be unable to set healthy boundaries for ourselves because we are not worthy of having our boundaries be respected. Shame is, I must hide who I am, okay? I can't be authentic, okay? I'm going to shapeshift. I'm going to shapeshift and I'm going to give everybody a version of me that they will like. And therefore, if I do that, they won't abandon me because I'm going to give them what they want, right? Because being myself, showing myself, exposing myself is just too shameful. So I'm going to shapeshift and shapeshift and shapeshift to please everybody. Shame is, I must be perfect. Because if I'm not perfect, I will be rejected. If I am not perfect, then this will prove that there's something wrong with me. Then that feeling of shame, will bubble up to the surface. And it will be really painful to experience it. So I have to be perfect in order to not experience that feeling of shame. I have to be perfect in order to suppress that feeling of shame. And I must work on myself more and more and more and more because I'm not good enough to have loving relationships in my life. I'm not good enough. I'm just not good enough. So I have to keep overworking myself. I have to be perfect. I have to strive for perfection. And that way I'm going to protect myself from that terrible feeling of shame. Shame is, I'm going to be invisible. I'm going to make myself invisible. Nobody is going to notice me. I'm going to stay hidden. And that way, nobody will ever find out my vulnerabilities. Nobody will ever abandon me, So I'm just going to hide. I'm going to hide myself because it's easier that way and I don't have to deal with that terrible feeling of shame being triggered if I meet someone who doesn't like me. Shame is, I must be the strongest person in the room. Okay, nobody's going to find out what my vulnerabilities are that way. I'm going to be strong. And then that way I'm going to mask all those things that I feel make me weak and therefore I feel are unacceptable. Those parts of me that I hate and that are unacceptable to me. Shame is, I'm going to hide behind humor. I'm going to make everybody laugh. I'm going to be the funniest person in the room. And that way I won't be a burden to anybody. I won't be a burden to anybody. I'm not going to, I don't want to be the person that weighs people down. Okay, so I'm going to hide my pain and I'm going to hide behind a mask of humor. I'm going to make everybody's world fun because then I can distract people from what's really going on. So I'm going to make myself so fun that that's all they're ever going to see about myself. Shame is also, I'm going to deplete myself to rescue you. Okay? Because unless I go out of my way to help others, then I am not worth being loved. I'm not going to be loved unless I go out of my way to rescue others. Because if I rescue somebody who's in trouble, then surely they will love me then. Surely they will love me then. Shame is, I'm a burden. Please don't do anything nice for me. Please don't compliment me. Please don't bring any attention to my qualities because I don't believe you. And shame is taking responsibility for things that are completely outside of your control, okay? is feeling like you caused somebody else anger or disappointment, like you caused some problems when you didn't, and what happened to you wasn't your fault. So all of this, what I'm trying to tell you, is that shame is essentially, if people get to know me, the real me, they're gonna abandon me. Shame is that inner critic that lives in your head, that voice that says, you're not good enough. Everybody will hate you if you say no. Everybody will hate you if you show them who you really are. Everybody will hate you if you don't deplete yourself. Everybody will hate you if you don't make them laugh, if you're not the strongest person in the room. You will be abandoned if you show the world who you really are. And so we say to ourselves, all right, I can't show them who I am, because that will lead to abandonment. I can't let that happen. So, if I show them who I am, they will abandon me, because that's what we've been taught. That's what we've been taught. And so with shame develops the fear of abandonment. And so what are our solutions to shame? Well, for one, we ruminate. We ruminate and we ruminate and we ruminate. We ruminate over trying to change people's point of view of us, because maybe if they change their views, that will fix that feeling of shame, right? Maybe if we go and prove them right, if we prove to them that this is not true, that what they think of us is not true, that that the smear campaign that was launched at us is not true. If we go and defend ourselves, maybe that will make that feeling of shame go away. We try to resolve our shame by over-explaining, right? By engaging with people that we know we should not be engaging with anymore. We think to ourselves, I have to go back there to this place full of unsafe people who trigger my shame, so that I can fix that feeling of shame. Another solution, unhealthy solution to shame, is I must stay hidden. I must hide. Because if I hide, I'll never be found out. If I hide, I no longer risk being abandoned. But then what happens if you do that? Well, you suppress your needs. Because then that leads to, if I have zero needs, if I have no needs, then I am no one's burden. If I have zero needs, then I can't get hurt. And so shame will cause us to completely cut ourselves off from having a healthy relationship with our needs, because there's so much fear that comes with the possibility that, our needs will not be met, because they weren't. Our emotional needs weren't met, during childhood or teenagehood, as we were growing up in a dysfunctional system. And so, we decided if we suppress our needs, if we have zero needs, then we won't be hurt anymore. But that doesn't change the fact that we actually do have fundamental needs. Those needs are still there. They're just suppressed deep down inside. This can also lead to that thought of, I don't need connections in my life. Forget that, right? And yet every single human being has a basic need to connect with other people. But what narcissistic abuse does, what dysfunctional families do, what a toxic parenting does, is that we cut that need away completely, and we say, I don't need connections in my life. Forget it, And then another solution that we think of is, never be authentic. Never be authentic. You have to present yourself as likable. You will do extra cooperation, and do whatever is asked of you. That way, if you do that, people won't see what you're hiding, those defects, right? Maybe if I do those extra things for you, it will compensate for the nothing that I am inside. This also leads us to learn to lie about who we really are. I must lie about my struggles. I must lie about who I am. I must isolate myself physically. I will have zero relationships, that way I can't get hurt. Or I'm going to have a lot of relationships, but I'm not going to connect genuinely. I'm always going to have that layer, that layer of shame that prevents people from really getting to know me. And for me, no longer having to play these roles, no longer having to rescue, no longer having to people please, learning to say no healthily, making your voice heard, being authentic, right? It's the layer of shame. It's that layer, that core wound of shame, that is the culprit behind so many struggles that scapegoated survivors have to go through. Now, it's important to understand this root of shame, because these wounds, they come from childhood, and like I was telling you, we may have become so accustomed to that feeling always being there that you may not even question its presence anymore. The truth is that all of us, every single child on this planet, is born with the need to be loved. All of us, as children, have relied on our environment to teach us about who we are and our place in the world with our child's mind, right? This is while the brain is still developing. This is, you're small and you're growing up, and this is your environment. Every single child that's born into this world wonders, the questions they ask themselves, first of all, is who am I, right? Am I special? Do I matter? Am I lovable? Do people like to spend time with me? Do people like me? So if a child is raised in a healthy household, and they get consistent positive messages about who they are, the child feels valued. They don't have to change a thing about themselves in order to have safety, emotional safety in their life. They don't have to change a thing about themselves in order to have emotional, physical, psychological safety in their life. A child growing up in that environment, they will have a positive self-image. They don't have, hordes of millions of insecurities, because they know that they are loved just as they are, and that they are human beings, and that making mistakes is normal, and that they are loved whether they will make a mistake or not, or whether they express an emotion or not, or whether they have a hard time behaviorally with something or not. They will be loved, and a healthy parent is going to work with the child towards better being, towards their better being, right? But a dysfunctional home, it will mirror a negative message to the child, and that message is shame on you. Okay? So that happens when we're very, very young and in teenage years, right? And for example, if you had, most likely caregivers that were emotionally unavailable, and it didn't matter how much you tried, they would always find a way to compare you to a sibling or to criticize you, no matter what you did. And you would be blamed for their emotional problems. You would be blamed for their inability to find happiness as adults. You would be blamed for their emotional dysregulation, and not just by the person who's dysregulated, but also by the entire clan in that household. A child is blamed for adult problems that are not in their control at all. And the message that we receive growing up, that the brain receives, that gets sucked into our subconscious, is shame on you. Shame on you. Nobody likes you. You cause problems. There's something wrong with your emotions. There's something wrong with your feelings. There's something wrong, with you as a person as a whole, and you are not worthy of love. If you think about upbringing, like for example, sharing an opinion, and then after sharing an opinion or expressing who you are, you'd be laughed at, your eyes would be rolled at you, you would be invalidated, where there comes the shame, right? There comes the shame, once again, triggered during childhood and teenagehood as you're growing up. If you were told that you were a burden, right? Your emotions were a burden. Your basic needs, the basic needs of a child were a burden. Not just that you were a burden, but you should be groveling on your knees for the food that you're receiving, right? That you owe them everything because they feed you, because they fulfill one of your very basic needs, which is not all of them. Being fed and having a roof is one of them. But if you don't have emotional security, and if you don't have connection with your caretaker, this does serious damage. This causes trauma. But they will play with that fact that, you receive food and therefore you have to worship me. You know, you have a roof over your head. Therefore, you have to worship me, and you have to feel every day terrible about who you are, because anything beyond that is bad, and you are bad. I mean, this is shame, shame, shame. All wounds of shame that you can't heal because you're a child. And so, you know, oh, and another one I can think of, you know, is you're told that you need to apologize for your reactions to abuse. You're told that you need to apologize for your reactions when you're antagonized, when somebody is not being okay with you, when somebody is, you know, emotionally dysregulated, emotionally unavailable, antagonistic. They have to release that pent-up anger on someone, so they will target you. They will target you for whatever reason, for your gender or the birth order, or because there's something about you that they find threatening, you know, and they have to, and then they will respond in a way that they will, you know, they will release their anger on you over and over again, and you respond to that, you react to that, and then you are told to apologize for reacting when somebody is hurting you. You know, broken promises, silent treatments, punishments, criticism, all of that sent a message while you're developing that something is wrong with you. Something is wrong with you. And abandonment, which is what they did to us, abandonment sends the greatest shame message, you know, because then you think to yourself, if they don't want you, then what does that say about you? If the people that are supposed to have a built-in biological connection with you, you know, if they don't want you, if they reject you, if they tell you that you need to change, you can't be yourself, you have to go against everything that you are in order to be accepted in the clan, which by the way is that never happens, you know. This is just a goalpost shifting, you know. It just doesn't happen. You can change and change and change and change and change, and they will still find a way to criticize you. They will, you know, as soon as the smallest thing happening, the verbal abuse, right away, you know, your character, you're the demon, you're evil, you'll die alone, nobody will love you, like all these, you know, the verbal abuse starts and it escalates from there, right? The second that you do something wrong, even though you've been, you know, trying so hard to do your best, you know, to do what is expected of you somehow without even knowing, because there's so much mind reading that goes on in those families. You know, it's like we're expected to be mind readers, psychic magicians, you know, that just automatically know, you know, what to do and what is expected of us, you know. I mean, look, all of this happens and we experience shame. We become self-critical. This just naturally happens. And as we become self-critical, you know, we start cutting away pieces of ourselves that we have been taught to hate. And so this is the part that I want you to become mindful of, okay? So, you know, as we grow up, we're told, okay, being assertive is bad. Expressing your opinion is bad. Okay, fine. So that means I either won't be assertive anymore. I'm just going to completely shut up, never tell anybody my opinion because that leads to punishment, or I'm going to express my opinion angrily because I expect a backlash, even though I might be in a safe environment or whatever, you know. I will assert my opinion aggressively because I expect some sort of backlash. But this is not cognitive. This is a feeling. If you're outgoing, adventurous, curious about the world, and you're constantly being told the world is dangerous, you can't go out there, you can't take care of yourself, you're too dumb to take care of yourself, you need mommy and daddy, even though you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you know, you can't make your own decisions, right? Okay, well then a part of you will say, well, maybe I am, maybe the world really is scary, and maybe the world really is terrifying, and maybe having an adventurous temperament is really bad, so I'm gonna cut that part of myself away. I'm gonna suppress that part of myself. I don't want it anymore. That part of myself has always caused me problems. Or people will tell you, you're too sensitive. I'm too sensitive? Fine. I'm gonna show you how tough I can be. Okay? Forget the sensitive. Forget it. Forget the sensitive. I'm just going to get rid of that part of myself, and I'm just gonna be the strongest person in the room at all times. Or I'll start numbing myself. I'm going to start numbing myself with drugs and alcohol, so that to completely disconnect from my emotional world. I'm just going to completely disconnect from my feelings, because my feelings are terrible and they cause me pain, they cause my environment pain, so I'm going to dissociate from my feelings. So I'm going to start taking drugs, I'm going to start drinking every day. Shame drives us to cut away parts of ourselves, and so that we basically operate on numbness or anger, and essentially we completely disconnect from ourselves. Completely disconnect from ourselves. Shame is the result of being unable to connect, with our environment. So here's what I'm going to tell you now about this, okay? The only thing that you need to change about yourself right now is that connection that you have with yourself. And that's it. You don't need to cut parts away of yourself. You don't need to hate anything about yourself. What needs to happen now is the knowing that actually nothing's wrong with you. And what happened was that you adapted to a very unhealthy environment, and then you carried all of that with you as you grew up beyond the narcissistic family system. But there's nothing wrong with you, okay? And there's nothing wrong with you. Not only is there nothing wrong with you, but they don't know who you are. They have no idea who you are. All they know is the person that they consistently triggered, and they put a label of that's your personality behind somebody who was consistently hurt, consistently triggered, consistently attacked in their own home, who lacked emotional safety, who didn't have a healthy connection, who didn't have a parent who mirrored back to them, because you had to always abide to whatever that parent wanted. You had to become what they wanted. But there was nobody that was attuning with you as a person. In fact, you were demonized for that. And so they don't know a thing about you. They don't know a thing about you. And who they think you are is not who you are at all. And this is what you need to start discovering for yourself, okay? Getting back all those parts that you've cut away because you feel ashamed, or you feel like, those things about you are terrible, but in fact they're really not. And you have to start taking care of the relationship that you have with yourself very seriously. In fact, this should be your top priority right now, is mending the relationship that you have with yourself. And it's self-compassion is actually no joke, but this is really truly something that, you probably often hear, but it's so important that you actually start doing it, doing things towards yourself that reflect the self-compassion towards yourself. You have to start taking care of yourself, treating yourself as your best friend, and certainly not hating any parts of yourself. It's the other way around. You got to start nurturing every part of yourself that you've cut away, that you've neglected, that you've oppressed, because you couldn't safely be yourself in your environment. Carl Jung rightfully said, become who you are afraid to be. Okay? Become who you are afraid to be. Okay? And so you need to start asking yourself some real questions, some serious questions, like who are you beyond them, beyond what you've been through? Who are you beyond the narcissistic family system? Who do you want to become? If you were to set goals for yourself, for the next 5 years, that align with who you want to become, with who you want to be, with who you actually are, but have not been able to nurture those parts of yourself yet. What would your dreams and aspirations look like to you? Right? What are those little steps that you can start taking that empower you towards self-acceptance? Become mindful in the ways that shame controls you. Become mindful of those self-sabotaging patterns that stem from shame, that stem from that I don't want to be found out. I want to stay invisible. I don't want people to get to know me. I can't say no. I can't be myself. Become mindful of how your behavior feeds that feeling. That's the trick. That's where the work really needs to be. And yes, there's a lot of fear when we go through this, and there's a lot of discomfort too. This is normal, you know. But you're revealing your authentic self. When you reveal who you are, the world will respond in kind. And I've said that before, and I'm going to say it again. This is truly how you weave out the cockroaches in your life, you know, is by really beginning to be comfortable with your own authenticity, no matter what anybody's opinion of you is. And remember to reach out, okay? Reach out, because creating new connections, new and safe connections, beyond that bubble, that, you know, that family culture where you came from, you know, and beyond all the unhealthy relationships that you've attracted over time, you know, creating new connections, unknown, you know, it's really important to go towards the unknown, making connections with people that, you know, don't feel familiar to you. You don't want to go towards the familiar. You want to go towards something new. You want to start doing new things and expanding your world in a completely different direction from where you come from and what you've known. And this is how you're going to grow. But doing all of this, you know, of course, there's a lot of fear. It can feel uncomfortable. You can make space within yourself to feel that feeling. It's normal. You can say to yourself, okay, this is scary. What I'm about to do is scary. I'm going to set a boundary. This is terrifying. Or I'm going to be myself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. That feeling is very terrible. And yes, it might not be well received if you still have cockroaches in your life, and that's okay. That's okay. You do it anyways. And then you keep going. Keep going. Keep going. And the more that you practice this, the easier it's going to get. And the less shame is going to have control over your life. Go out of your comfort zone. And of course, always remember, I love myself. I trust myself. Repeat that over and over in your mind until it sinks in. I love myself. I trust myself. I hope this helped you. And I'll see you soon.